heart of the system is the FiTech unit. Welcome back, faithful subscribers. And if you're not a subscriber, shame on you. But it's only one click away. So go on and do that now. It's like over here or down here. I don't ever remember. They move it around. So just find it and click it. Alright, now that that's done, let's take a look at the topic at hand. I have finally gotten around to converting this old jalopy, you might say, to fuel injection. And it was pretty straightforward to do. So let's just go through that here presently, and I'll show you what I did. At the heart of the system is the FiTech unit. It's the Go EFI4 600 horsepower system, and which is more than enough for this 460. And that's the throttle body there, and it also is the computer and has most of the sensors housed right there. There's really just one or two external sensors. The temperature sensor, which you can't see there, and then also the O2 sensor, which is on the exhaust pipe. We'll get to that here in a minute. But it bolts down just like a regular carburetor right on top of the intake, and then you just have to run a few wires. There's the coolant temperature sensor wire. It goes right here into the top of the manifold. Well, no, the water neck rather. It's pretty straightforward. Then you got a couple more wires that come through here, through that loom. And you can see I installed a weather pack there for disconnecting it all pretty easy. And then the rest of that just gets buried into the factory harness, which I've also recently redone. And that yellow and red wire is that's the main power feed and the fan switch wire. And we'll get to that later. On this side we have the other wires. We've got the wire for the distributor here, and then we've got three wires here. One for the ignition signal, one for the points control, that's for timing control, and this orange wire, not the big one, but this other orange wire right there, which is for the fuel pump. So other than the O2 sensor wires, that's pretty much all the wires you need. Oh yeah, and then there's one set of wires right there. I've got zip tied to some other wires that go into the cab, and that's of course for the handheld programmer. Right here, pretty close to the manifold flange, is the wideband O2 sensor, which is responsible for keeping your air-fuel ratio on target, and probably some other things, but that's where it is. And they give you this little bracket and some cheap exhaust clamps, well, cheap radiator clamps actually, to put them on. I elected to use these exhaust clamps rather than welding it, and they've actually worked really good so far. No leaks. One of the main reasons for me getting the system was to be able to control the timing electronically. To do so, you get a MSD 8577 or something distributor. That distributor right there, and to replace, if you're on a Ford, for example, the old Duraspart distributor. And that's so you can phase the rotor. And if you buy one of these systems, you'll know all about that. That's a pretty simple thing to do. But you lock the distributor out, you phase the rotor, and then you can make all your timing adjustments on the handheld, which is a pretty awesome thing. This actually works. The FiTech has the ability to signal the distributor without a CDI box, but which is a capacitive discharge ignition, I think is what that stands for. But I'm already had the 6AL CDI box, which is in the cab, so I elected to use it, and it works in conjunction with that box. And It all seems to work very well together. The fuel delivery part of the system wound up being the most complicated part for me, but I've got it all figured out now, I think, so y'all can just copy what I did. That's the FiTech pump there, and it was a pretty good deal. You can buy them a lot cheaper. All you need is one that's capable of 60 psi at so many liters per hour, or liters per minute. I can't remember the unit of measurement, but anyways, this was fine once you factor in the amount of hose and fittings you got with it. But rather than run that rubber hose down the frame rail all the way, I elected to bend up some 3/8 steel line, which I have installed, flared and installed to fit the fittings on the rubber hose, and you can see where they go up underneath the body and turn back into rubber up there to feed the FiTech throttle body. Once you get the hang of, after you mess up enough tube, you pretty well get the hang of bending it. But you'll notice the fuel pump's a pretty good ways away from the fuel tank, which is back there. And that's usually a no-no with the with inline fuel pumps, and they need to be mounted lower, and there's just a lot of considerations with them. Well, Ford in the 70s didn't give you just a great tank to start with for fuel injection, and I really didn't want to swap this tank because it's a new one and I've had it in for a few years, and I'd have to take my exhaust loose, and that was just going to be a pain. And then once you have it loose, it's kind of hard to mount a fuel pump, an internal fuel pump that will really work properly, because of the way the tank's designed. We won't get into all of that, but suffice to say that it was more trouble than it was worth to try to put a fuel pump in the tank. Also, FiTech's Fuel Command Center is currently not recommended for off-road situations. That may change, but whenever I did this just a few months ago or a few weeks ago, that was the latest. So what I did is I have this Holly red, you can see right here, of course connected with the weather pack connector, the Holly red supplies this homemade surge tank right here, which is just made from a Wix filter housing and a deep Wix fuel filter. And there's a tube inside of it, it's a pickup tube that goes to the bottom that allows the inline pump to gravity feed and draw off of this. Once the fuel gets to the top, it leaves via that silver line that you can't really see right there. Well, I guess you can see it a little bit. And follows the bed and then the frame back to the fuel tank, where I brazed in a return line fitting into the fuel neck to act as a return for the system. So I may make another video about this homemade surge tank. It didn't cost much, probably 35 or 40 bucks to build, and I've driven it a pretty good bit since I've done the conversion, and this seems to work pretty good. So I would certainly consider a fuel surge tank if you're not going to run the Fuel Command Center. It's a little bit hard for me to get some of these angles, these shots, so bear with me. This is a radiator out of a 96 F350, and I had to shift this whole thing to the passenger side a couple of inches to make everything clear. Not ideal, but it works pretty good because a Ford, I think it's Aerostar fan, fits pretty much perfectly on it. I just made some tabs for the bottom, and I used to have some tabs up here that I've lost that bolted there, but I've got zip ties, and they've been working for quite some time now. So if it ain't if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But the fan operates actually off the FiTech unit too. The FiTech unit, that yellow wire grounds a relay which I built my own, well, I guess I'd say wired my own relay box here, which controls the fan. It grounds the relay out, and all the relay in here does is switch it to a 12 volt relay, so it also 12 volt positive signal, so that it comes on when I turn on the air conditioning as well. Now, let me see if I can get this open with one hand. And then in here, it looks kind of messy, but this this whole thing pulls out, and there's some more heavy-duty relays in here that control the actual switching of the two fans. So that's kind of cool. The other relays in that box, in case you're interested, operate the winch controls and my front LED lights. But the FiTech unit, I can program it to turn on the fans at any temperature that I want. And works pretty dang good. I've never been able to keep this engine cool until I swapped on that unit, and I would say it was all of that unit, but I've done a lot of different things to this motor in the past year, so there could be a lot of things contributing. But it runs cool as a cucumber. Here's my cheat sheet. Some of these words you see in here aren't very obvious if you've never done EFI tuning before. I guess the faults are pretty obvious, but of course that's barometric, battery voltage, auto air control steps. That's an important adjustment to be made, but we won't get into all that in this video. If there's interest in it, I can post some stuff up. But I guess let's just watch this thing crank. Of course, if you can hear that, that's the inline pump priming everything up. And now I'll start it. You can see it's not very warm at all. System's probably only got maybe 30 miles or so on it so far, so it's not perfect, and there's still some tweaking that I can do, but it runs pretty dang good, better than it ever has with the carburetor, to be honest. The drivability is astounding. I can go on and on about how much I like it, but when you have a computer controlling most any controllable variable with the engine, you know, with respect to timing and fuel, I mean, what else do you expect? But it works really good, and I'll be hard pressed to justify buying another carburetor. But anyways, thanks for watching, and I hope this video has been somewhat informative. Maybe I'll get out and drive it one of these days.